So one of the biggest problems I think that we have in the discussion on religion with people of particular belief that the reason that they come to YouTube is to spread the word of God, these evangelical people, proselytizing people, these apologetics, people like Venom Fang X or Together for Peace, or I don't want to, label them a label they don't like, but think of your stereotypical evangelical theist, Christian, young earth creationist. I think one of the biggest problems we have with discussion with them is that they can't conceive of a world where God does not exist. Like, God is so ingrained in their beliefs, in their way that they think, that it's a presupposition. It's an assumption that they make. It's in the premise, unjustifiably. Big Lundy made a video on the problems of presuppositions. So that's not what this video is about. But it's about how the fact that they can't think of a world without God. Because it's not just that they assume that God exists and then they, from that point, make logical arguments from that assumption. It's that they literally, as far as I can tell, not think of a world without God. Think of like the watchmaker argument, for example. There are a lot of problems with the watchmaker argument, but nonetheless, I can think of a world where everything was intelligently designed off of the model of the watchmaker argument. For those people who have read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or seen the movie, there's a scene where Arthur is with, I can't remember, he had a really weird name, it was funny too. The guy who invented Norway, I think, or got a medal for inventing Norway. But they're reviewing Earth Mark II, which I don't want to reveal too much about the book or the movie, but the whole point was that they're creating a new Earth. And on this Earth that they're creating, there are a bunch of workers who are like painting cliff sides to be orange, and they're filling the seas with water. And they use they press some button or pull some lever, and all the electricity in the world, jumps from all over and whatnot, and life begins again. Essentially, it's like just nowism. So I can imagine a world like that. It's not inconceivable that God created everything, and that God created everything literally just now or whatever. Young Earth creationism's perspective that perspective of the young Earth creationist is a possibility. It's not a possibility I believe in because I think there's just empirical evidence to suggest otherwise. But can a young Earth creationist who wants to actually have these discussions really conceive of a universe where God doesn't exist and where the Big Bang explains how we got to where we are right now, where evolution explains speciation and the diversity of life on Earth, and where they're just wrong, and where they're wrong about how morality comes from God and how their own morality it doesn't really come from God, it just comes from their belief in God, and a world where things are okay without God. And if you can't think of that world the way that I can think of a world with God, why are you having a conversation at all on YouTube in the religious community? Because you're already closed off to changing your mind. There are a lot of people who are willing to change their mind. There are a lot of people who do change their mind. They convert or deconvert from theism or convert to atheism, however you want to put it. But these people who just presuppose God's existence, can they really visualize the world? Can they visualize a world where a watch naturally occurs? Because no matter how confounded that might seem, it's a distinct possibility. In fact, I would just go as far to say that watches do naturally occur because we're part of nature. So yeah, that was the point of this video, was just to say that one of the bridges you have to, one of the gaps you have to close with this discussion with these people is you really have to wonder, can they see a world without God? In a world that's identical to this one. I had a conversation with Big Lundy, about a long one over a lot of topics, and he talked about this conversation between Ludwig Wittgenstein, and an associate of his. And he says to his associate, why is it natural for us to think that humans would assume that the sun revolves around the Earth and the Earth does not revolve around the sun? And his associate says, well, because it looks that way. It looks geocentric. And Ludwig Wittgenstein concludes conversation by saying that, well, how would it look any different if the Earth was revolving around the sun, or if the sun was revolving around the Earth? And so the point there being is that you can't tell from the perception of being on Earth. If you're on Earth, you will not be able to intuitively deduct that it is revolving around the sun. And so I think that's kind of similar to this whole thing with religion, which is, even though things look so absolutely like God exists, or maybe if you're a devout atheist, whatever that means, and you just can't conceive of a world without where God couldn't exist, this applies to you too. Things might seem so thoroughly one way. It might so thoroughly look like God exists. But if you change your perception and you look from a different perspective, you just might find that you're a little bit more skeptical than you might think. So, happy day after 4th of July.